Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is the OpenStack Unlocked podcast. I am your host, Nick Chase from Mirantis and OpenStack Unlocked, and we are here with my co-host, John Janchig.
My ho-host, John Janchig, and this is Baby Cat. He'll be getting out of here now.
Okay, and this cat. As you can tell, we are having an interesting day as far as technology is concerned. And in fact, we've been having an interesting week as far as technology is concerned. And in fact, the interview that you are about to see is not one that we did today. In fact, we did it last week, and it has taken us about a week to recover from that. Isn't that right, John?
There was a lot to digest.
A lot to digest. If you've ever listened to the podcast, you know that we rarely stay on topic, much to John's chagrin, but it's always interesting. It's always interesting. I will say that. And this is definitely no exception. Today,
although in this case, we went further afield even than we normally do.
Yes, this was definitely one of those times where you will definitely see the moment when I think to myself, where did I lose control? At any moment, we are going to start. And this week we have Jamie Dobson from Container Solutions, one of the more interesting people that you will hear from in technology. So let's dive into that, and we'll see you on the other side. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I am Nick Chase, and welcome to the OpenStack Unlocked podcast. We are here with my illustrious co-host, John Janchig, and we are here with Jamie Dobson. Jamie, please introduce yourself.
Yes, good morning in your time, I think. Hi, my name's Jamie Dobson, and I'm the CEO of Container Solutions, which is a company out of Amsterdam and London. And we like to mess about with things like Mesos frameworks and the DCOS and stuff like that.
Okay, great. So, Jamie, you are here to talk about a couple of things. You're here primarily, you've came to our attention based on Minimesos. Tell us a little bit about Minimesos.
Oh, yeah. So Minimesos is it's a little bit like, Mini-Me from the Austin Powers movies. It's a sort of cool little funky thing we've got. So Minimesos is a containerized Apache Mesos cluster. And what that allows you to do is build applications locally on your laptop, iron out any configuration issues you might have with your cloud native application or any custom frameworks you're building. And before you go ahead and deploy them, you'll be able to find most of the problems right there in your local environment.
Okay. And so now it doesn't that, so, okay, when you say problems in your local environment, you don't mean problems that are specific to your local environment. You mean problems with your application.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
okay.
That's right. So we're not looking for problems on the laptop. That's correct. So back in the day, because I'm sort of heading towards my 40th birthday in August, back in the day I was into extreme programming, test-driven development, things like that. And that was all about shortening feedback cycles. So the shorter the feedback cycle was, the quicker the developer could go. And as time has progressed and as we've moved on, we've gone away from single, monolithic applications to microservices. And once you have microservices, you need to orchestrate them. Once we moved into that space, the feedback loop started getting longer and longer because you wouldn't really know the true behavior until you were up in the cloud somewhere on a Mesos cluster. So what we wanted to do was bring the Mesos cluster back down from the cloud and onto the laptop, thus making development somewhat easier. We built the tool for ourselves and a couple of our clients, and basically it just took off after that because people liked using it.
So basically what you're doing, if I'm understanding you correctly, is you are taking this whole idea of microservices where everything is isolated. Ooh, don't put the notes in front of your face, Nick. Where everything is isolated and you are making it once again possible to see what's going to happen without having to build the whole thing.
Well, in a nutshell, yes. You do have to construct the cluster, but that's in a simple configuration file. The point is you can see what's happening, scale your cluster up and down, look at the interactions without going to a cloud.
I see.
And that makes the development experience really nice.
So have you learned anything? I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
Well, I was going to just try to get things straight in my head. So it sounds like what you're doing is you're starting with a laptop and you're installing Docker on it, and you're deploying Docker containers that contain the components of a Mesos architecture. And then you are having people deploy their containerized applications across that containerized Mesos cluster in order to test the interactions and control plane functionality.
That's more or less spot on. That's about half the picture. So the containerized cluster is exactly what it is, just as you described. But on top of that, we've got an API for running system tests as well. So you can also test your application from within Java, or also via the testing API, in which case you can use whatever language you like.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? So you could do test-driven development for your cloud-native apps locally. And once you check in, you see the cluster will be recreated at all the different stages of the DTAP pipeline, and then you'll know that everything's working right the way through to production. So the infrastructure you described, which is handy, is a big part of it. But on top of that are all the testing libraries as well.
And then are you assuming that when people move to production, they're also going to use containerized Mesos?
Well, they will use, so we will use it at Container Solutions right up to a staging environment. And then when we go live, we'll actually use a full-blown, actually we'd use the DCOS actually instead of Mesos, because it's now superseded it. But once you get to production, you would use a full-blown Mesos cluster or the DCOS. But up until that point, it's not actually necessary.
Gotcha. So it's container inception pretty much at this point.
Well, it all gets a bit, well, so recently, one of the additions to Minimesos in the last release was to add Weave scope, and that gives you a good chance to visualize what's going on. But of course, when you visualize your cluster, you see Minimesos itself and the application containers. Luckily, Weave Scope is a pretty powerful tool, and you can filter out the Minimesos cluster.
Okay.
It's very funny that when you turn Scope on, the first thing you see is the cluster you're actually in. So it is all a little bit recursive. That's true.
Gotcha. Okay. So now you've got some big company news this week.
Yeah, the big news of today is that we are launching a subsidiary. We call it DevOps Sense, which, of course, as an acronym sounds like DOS, and then people are like, "Oh wow, we're back to Windows, we're back to the 80s." And I'm like, "Oh God, no!" Oh, we're back to the 80s only in the sense that nothing actually works right now. It's like, as Brian Cantrell from Joining loves to remind me, we're heading for peak confusion. This might very well be true. So DevOps Sense is a wholly owned subsidiary of Container Solutions, and the idea of that business is to try to make sense from DevOps. So on the one hand, the work we're doing at Container Solutions is completely necessary. A lot of it's to do with distributed systems and managing them, but for many customers, that is too far. That is simply too advanced. And DevOps Sense is about getting the foundations there in terms of culture, automation, scripting. And I guess if a company or a customer had spent a year or two with DevOps Sense, they might be ready for the bleeding edge stuff that Container Solutions are doing. And we really wanted to come up with a way to service the needs of these different customers, and we just couldn't do that within the Container Solutions brand. So in a way, what we've done is split ourselves into different teams, a different service offering. We already started back in January, to be honest, testing these services with enterprises, and the DevOps Sense stuff has been so successful, we were now able to launch it today as its own subsidiary.
So this is very interesting. I think I can see what you mean from a management perspective, is that you actually need two companies in order to accommodate the conflicting cultural assumptions about cultural change that have to take place And the delta between a company like Container Solutions, which is really, as you say, on the bleeding edge of this stuff, and most of what Container Solutions does every day will be completely incomprehensible to untrained, even highly technical, but untrained in, in the specific products and APIs involved, infrastructure that you're using. It makes it makes enormous sense. I mean, it's a way of embracing the fact that that the present day and the near future are in conflict with one another, and that the work of DevOps Sense is to resolve this conflict, right, productively.
Well, in a sense, it is that sort of conflict we're trying to resolve. I mean, at the heart of Container Solutions, you have a bunch of engineers, and engineers primarily are interested in solving problems for customers. And if we're going to do that, then we have to change and adapt as well. And I think we just needed different faces and different offerings to help address all customer needs and not just a specific subset of them.
Right. And what kind of problems do you find your clients are trying to solve?
So clients of Container Solutions or of DevOps Sense?
Either one.
Well, either one. So the type of people who would pick up the telephone and call us in regards to Container Solutions, they've usually got really difficult problems. How to, for example, process terabytes of data and then federate the data and get it to the right people in a timely fashion. That's some of the work we've been doing in Switzerland for the past 6 months.
But now those are the technical solutions, okay? But what would you say are the outcomes that they're trying to get to by...
Well, so all of our customers, nearly all of them, they have there's an increasing pressure to reduce the labour costs. So there's a downward pressure on the labour bill, although they're not against paying high wages. But everybody's on an insane cost cutting drive now. More, bigger, faster. And that's partially coming from consumers. Consumers are so restless now that they want features quicker and quicker and quicker. Now, Moore's Law from Intel is no longer a law, but it's almost a standard. People expect features more quickly. So I think a lot of the pressure to go more quickly is driven by a change in consumer behavior. So even though we're sometimes buried in the depths of a company, actually you could probably trace the value chain right out to a consumer in the high street. And customers are looking to us to fix that. So they'll do the cutting edge research with Container Solutions. They'll even do some of the transformation work with us. But if it was a large-scale change requiring extra training, then they would probably go to DevOps Sense.
Gotcha. Okay.
So Moore's Law has become a curse. Moore's Law has become a curse for our generation, and we're all guilty of it. I mean, I start to have a fit if the bus is a minute late. I'm like, how did I get like this? What happened?
That's true. Now, I think something that we're going to see more of is something that is a topic that you and I seem to share an interest in, is AI.
Right.
So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, so I always get in trouble from my PR people because they say to me, what is it you do? They said, so it's like you do containers, we get that, and you do ops and automation, that's that bit we get. They said, but what about that talk you did in Berlin the other week where you spoke about the end of the capitalist system? They said, what is that all about? And I said to them, well, actually, they're related. And I think they're related along these lines. The containerization is essentially about taking operators out of the data center. And once you take operators out of any system, essentially, you start to be able to scale massively. So in the same way that photography was digitized, and then as soon as it was, we hit a sort of Moore's Law increase in productivity. Once we digitize the data center, we're going to see massive leaps in what we can do there. And it's my belief that the operatorless data center is going to let us start to run machine learning algorithms over those different configurations. And so essentially, the link between machine learning and automated optimization are actually containers and containerized data centers. Now, if we succeed at at getting rid of people from the data center at the same time as our colleagues in medicine and robotics make everybody else unemployed, we're going to have a political situation that we've simply never faced as a people. And that's how come I'm always talking about AI and post-capitalism.
Okay.
And the thing is, it sounds like science fiction, right? Except there's a company called Skipjack in London, and they are already profitable using machine learning techniques to optimize application configs.
That's very interesting.
It's crazy. So I'm sat here thinking, why are we wasting our time with containers when these guys are already doing it, without a single human being?
That's it. Well, I was going to ask if you thought that we could really get to the point where we could truly eliminate humans from the process.
Of this I've got no doubt. And some of the smartest people on the planet are working on this as we speak, and some of the less smart people, like me, are trying to commercialize this.
Well,
so this seems great to me. I mean, because the people you're not replacing are the marketing people. So we're good. They're, the annoying engineering people go away. This is all good. Post-capitalism is a friendly place where it's all about the elevator pitch.
So you might
still has to write the algorithms, John.
You in your jest you've discovered a fundamental truth of automation. Anything that's routine can actually be automated. So radiologists are no more safer than a factory worker. So it's not blue collar versus white collar. Whereas data scientists, marketeers, and hairdressers are very safe because their jobs are extremely difficult to automate. They're non-routine.
That's true because it's creative.
Well, some would argue radiologists could be creative, but unfortunately the machine is more creative. And I mean, I can give you a great example of this. There's a bit of software and a bit of kit that scans breast tissue for anomalies, and it performs as well as the humans do, but it also managed to find a different pattern that humans were not able to find, and that indicates your chances of survival, which has a knock-on effect for how you can be treated. So in that sense, the machines were already being more creative than the human operators.
Now how did it do that though? Did it do that by finding an anomaly that it was programmed to find? And in that case, was it programmed to find that anomaly by the operators?
Well, I think so. The way machine learning typically works is you set up the neural net and then it starts teaching itself. And so it was set up, it was positively reinforced to find patterns, but it found this pattern with that mechanism, but it's not something a human would think to look for.
Yeah.
And that's really scary. Did you ever see deep learning playing Arkanoid?
Absolutely.
And it started discovering its own strategies. I mean, at university, I studied AI, and I said we'll never beat Go. And once we beat Go,
yeah.
I've been sort of feeling insecure ever since.
It's interesting, and it has a great deal to teach people too, because when, as you just explained, machine learning proceeds with the task of learning without preconceived notions. It's not like people who have been it's more like the way babies learn than the way, or animals learn, than the way adult humans learn after they've been subjected to the rigors of an intellectual, of an education, and so have been hypothetically given a framework that, some sort of a framework that's supposed to make things easier to absorb. And in some cases it may do so, but it's also obscuring, for example, that pattern that doesn't happen to fit the framework. So that humans won't discover that part of the map, but a machine learning algorithm that just, doesn't care and makes no value judgments at all is just going to look at the data and find that eventually.
Yeah, that's it. You take the child's mind to problems, and you see different things. But unfortunately, none of us are children. At our age, we might as well be dead. We're in the end game now, but kids who are between 5 and 10 and machine learning algorithms will see things that we didn't think to look for. That's totally correct. And And I think through that thread of logic, containers, big data, lots of CPUs, and advances in machine learning, the data center will look nothing like it looks now in, I think, the next at least probably 5 years, maybe less. And I think we are not facing that responsibility as a group of people. And I think that's the link between with AI, containers, and post-capitalism, is that each one will give birth to the next. And I think the question is going to be, what are we going to do about it?
I think that's very true, and I think we're all kind of facing that change in the world and in sort of the change in what's going on. I mean, our co-founder Boris just published a post, "Infrastructure software is dead." It basically just said, "Look, guys, the world is changing. You know, software models are not what they used to be," and he's right. I mean, things do change, and they're changing a heck of a lot faster than I think anybody is really anticipating. Artists who used to go on tour and lose money on tour so that they could sell albums now give away music to promote their tours so they can make money on their tours.
Right.
It's really kind of weird. And I think if you can't adapt to the world around you, you're kind of in trouble.
Well, at the moment you are, and maybe this is what Jamie was kind of talking about when he discussed, the moral responsibility of what happens of post-capitalist evolution, right? I mean, at the moment, partly because the timescales are still relatively slow, we tend, certainly in America as a culture, us having a sort of a dog-eat-dog approach to, the universe, to think that it's that people are obliged to adapt. That, if you lose the job in the factory, you're, sure, we can give you a little money to help you go to school and retrain yourself for something else, but sort of continually repurposing yourself has to be your job, right? Yeah. And I think, I kind of suspect that we're talking about disruption at a scale that can't be handled by a kind of an externalization of individual, of everything onto individual responsibility in this kind of pioneering, way. We have to be morally responsible for the destruction that we cause on the way to creating a better world.
Well, so that's the thing. That's the thing we're avoiding. We're not taking responsibility. We're very good in tech at paying lip service to stuff, lip service to diversity, and lip service to equality. But when it comes to implementation, we're actually really crap at that. Labour is only fluid on economic models. In real life, I was brought up in a deindustrialized town. Now, the economic models would say that one industry left, another one will move in, and the people will find economic value. The reality is what they find is a bottle of whiskies and drugs and despair. And we connect so much identity to what we do that once you get beyond 25, then it's extremely difficult to change what you're doing. Now, this is compounded by the acceleration of technology. So there's a huge war going on out there between container orchestrators, and yet we're already seeing that being disrupted by things like Joint's Container Pilot, which is sort of a semi-autonomous piece of software that manages applications with hardly any interference from an operator. Now, they've only just started with that, but you can see that the potential is huge. And if Skipjack succeed, you can see that the potential is huge. So we're even skipping, we're skipping ahead so quickly that one technology is not even getting itself embedded in our industry before another one displaces it.
Thank you so much for bringing us back on track, Jamie.
You're welcome. Back to containers.
Right, back to containers. It's supposed to be my job, which I have failed miserably at in this conversation. Yeah. So, yeah.
So let's come back to DevOps Sense. So container solutions, that's the bleeding edge of the bleeding edge. And DevOps Sense is about DevOps Sense is acknowledging that change, economic change, and even on a business level is difficult. And DevOps Sense provides those sort of those coaching and transformation services to try to make those transitions less brutal. And I think we figure, that's a pretty good way to go about it.
Less brutal is good. There you go. That's the lesson from this conversation. Less brutal is good.
Well, people forget to be nice to each other. My God.
That's right.
Is DevOps Sense then curricularizing around a particular prescriptive stack of tools, or following the market to let the market sort of say, okay, Docker, it's got to, there's got to be some Docker in there, there's got to be some this in there, there's got to be some that in there, or how are you going about concretizing what you teach?
So I think that's a fair question. So in terms of the tool stack, definitely not. So the central model in DevOps and in DevOps Sense is the learning cycle. So that's, try, do, learn. Now, the Agilistas have gone completely insane with this. So, Scrum has become a sort of fascism. It's an awful cult. Nevertheless, at the heart of that, the learning cycle is very important. Typically, tooling comes in after a few iterations, a few months of doing stuff. So the first thing you need to do is relax organizational controls, take the lay of the land, and then start to strategize with the people you're working with in order to generate a plan on the fly. If anything, we're heavily influenced by Henry Mintzberg's emergent strategy. There's nothing new under the sun. So his models from about the 1980s, 83 are basically central to what we're doing at DevOps Sense. I actually talk a lot about Mintzberg in one of my other talks. And the tool set will then fix itself. Of course, we work with many vendors, and Mesosphere's DCOS is something we would certainly recommend to many of our customers, but if the context's not correct, we might recommend them something else.
Excellent. Okay, so before we get to our kind of for our end game here, do you have any final questions, John?
I have a lot. I was ready to launch into Peter Quinn, the Gawker case, and implications to modern journalism. We could easily do another 45 minutes to an hour.
Well, I'd say go for it, since you're always telling me to shut up.
No, but to be fair, no other technical questions. I'm kind of intrigued to grab a copy of Minimesos and see if I can deploy a containerized Mesos cluster on my laptop, though.
So, John, you don't even need to bother doing that. Go to minimesos.org/try, and there's an interactive terminal right there on the website. So you don't even have to download it. If you can survive for a few minutes in the terminal and you're still in the mood, then there's a URL on the previous page. You can get it downloaded in a few minutes. Well, actually, a few seconds.
We have a traditional last question, at least for the last couple of episodes. Jamie, if you could suggest any two people for us to have on the podcast, who would those two people be?
Living or dead?
Well, dead people are hard for us to book, so living would be good.
Ooh. Now, is that a podcast that you would be hosting, or is it a podcast where I can also come and ask questions?
Well, you can, I'll tell you what, we'd be hosting it. It would be this podcast, but you can also come on as a guest host. How's that?
Come on as a guest host. Okay, who would I get? Well, so I'm a little bit biased because I find the United States, just such an enduring, source of entertainment. So I would probably put Hillary on with Donald opposite her. I want to know what they're thinking about in terms of artificial intelligence, post-capitalism. I'd quite like to inject Donald with a truth serum before he starts answering the questions. And hell, while we're at it, I'd inject Hillary too, twice. I think that would work for me.
Oh my goodness. I don't think you need to inject Donald with a truth serum. I think that's the problem.
Right.
Sorry.
I would want to measure his fingers. I would ask him about his fingers just to see his reaction. But speaking of dangerous people, I think he might have me killed. I mean, I'm so annoying just to normal people. I can't imagine how annoying I would be to somebody like that. I would relish. I would make him suffer, but I figure he'd probably be able to make me suffer more.
I'm not saying anything.
You're speechless.
Oh no, I have plenty to say, but I'm not saying any of it. None of it. None of it. Not saying any of it. Please, John, don't let me talk.
Okay.
Don't let me talk. Don't let me talk.
I think though that what we were hosting,
yes,
hoping for was you could recommend some people in the community that we and you could talk to.
Yes, real
extend the network.
But they're also boring. Okay, who's the interesting people from our community? Okay, so Brian Cantrell is pretty interesting, and they've just done that deal with Samsung. So I'd be pretty interested to hear what he's got to say. I don't know if he's ever been on your show.
No.
So Brian, I would pick Brian. Our chief scientist, Adrian Moat, he'd be brilliant. The problem is he's from the Shetland Islands, so his accent's like off the charts. Even I can't understand it. So I don't know how it would go down with the American audience, but definitely Adrian and Brian would be excellent additions to your show. I'm sure of it.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you much. All right. So it just remains for me to thank everybody, Jamie Dobson and John Janechik, my co-host, and I am Nick Chase. And thank you all. And obviously, thank you all for spending your time with us. And we will see you next time. All right, Jamie, thank you. And if you'll all hang on, we'll give you some final thoughts.
That was excellent.
Yes, that was, like I said, I don't know where I was expecting that to go, but that was definitely not it.
Well, it went pretty much everywhere, but it shows that everything is really connected, and Silicon Valley, prides itself, I think, or arrogates to itself the role of evolving culture, society, government, and all this, important stuff. It's interesting to see how those plugs and sockets actually connect periodically, and to review whether the end result that we're collectively producing is fair for everybody, or even for most people.
Yeah. I mean, we of course are people who actually care whether it's fair. Not everybody cares whether it's fair, which is that's not a good thing about people. I don't like that about people. I don't know about you. I like people to be fair, because my inner child, my biggest expression when I was a child was, "That's not fair." Yes. Anyway, what I thought from a technical standpoint was very interesting was the notion that we're practically, things are moving so fast now, we're practically leapfrogging technologies, which I thought was interesting.
Well, it is pretty clear that you and I working with OpenStack, which is still at this point in the IaaS space, but is rapidly evolving itself to work with containers too, with Project Cola and all the other stuff that's going on inside the community. That there's this whole other population of people who are just working natively in containers now, and are really much more comfortable with that whole way of thinking about things. And
that's right.
And, they use Mesos on their laptops via Minimesos, which is quite an impressive collection of albeit thin but beautifully engineered APIs and connectives that produce a very impressive effect. You really can run a more than entirely basic, fully functional Mesos master-slave arrangement on your desktop with the necessary trimmings to treat it as a target platform for smallish deployments of your stuff, also in containers.
And of course, in the real world, you still need IaaS, because you still need to have resources to run all of those on.
Well, quite fascinatingly,
yeah.
You may need it as a base layer to run this stuff on. But on the other hand, there are many schools of thought at this point, even around OpenStack, that say, no, what we should have is the container layer at the bottom and then the OpenStack layer. So
that's fine. Hey,
there are many ways to bake this cake.
That's right. And there's nothing wrong with that, Absolutely. As long as it works, I think the main thing that we're getting to at this point, as we reach peak confusion, which I love, we are starting to do things that we just could not have imagined doing. And I think right now we should come back and look at this, 2 years from now, we'll probably be going, wow, all these things that we did in the last 2 years, we weren't even considering back when we talked to Jamie Dobson. So,
well, we'll have Jamie back and, see how our collective analysis of Western civilization has fared.
I was going to say, that is, if we haven't all been eaten by the robots. So,
yeah, the singularity could have occurred by then, I guess.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. But we have creative jobs, so we'll just be working for our robot overlords.
That's right. Well, I for one welcome our robot overlords.
There you go.
Being a serious Pokemon Go player in my spare time, of course, I'm highly familiar with all of my robot overlords.
Yes. Oh, yes. If only I had the opportunity and the time. At any rate, so any final thoughts, John?
No, I think that's about it. I would recommend that everybody go to minimesos.org and look at the videos there, because they will give you a very clear, crisp idea of what Minimesos is all about. And they have a facility there that lets you test it without even downloading it to your PC, which is really cool.
Excellent. So, please, so first of all, thank you, Jamie Dobson, for joining us. Thank you, John Janeshig, for being here. I am Nick Chase, and thank all of you for spending your time with us. And we hope to have you back again next time. Thanks a lot.
Bye.